shin splints are the symptom and not the problem. This is if your gym crush sees you walking like this, man, it's gonna make you look all hot and sexy. Trust me on that one. What's going on, everybody? Hey, it's Hopper. We got Brutus. Today's topic for this video is shin splints. We will discuss shin splints here on this whiteboard, and then we'll get into a couple ways that we can actually treat shin splints as well as to prevent them. When we define shin splints, it's typically a significant amount of pain in the front part of the shin. We will oftentimes find it in beginner runners. The first couple things that we need to look at and understand is the foot strike. When we look at the foot strike, both when we walk and when we run. So if we were to draw a graph out just like this, and if we were to, you got your X and we got your Y, and if we were to look at someone's leg right here, and then if we look at this angle right here, when they lift their foot up while they walk, and then if we have this one right here, so if we have person number 1 and then person number 2, we're gonna notice that there's a bigger degree on this angle of the foot versus this one. To further demonstrate this, when we walk, the foot strike while we walk will dictate how the tibialis anterior, which is this muscle right here, how that muscle contracts and how it behaves. There's a great example from this one movie that I'll show with respect to how we can walk. It's a nice comparison between two people. And the first thing that we want to look at is the head movement. If someone walks side to side like this, and we see their head moving side to side in that manner, then we're actually not going to get the type of flexion in the foot, the flexion in the knee, and the hip extension that we want. So this clip right here, I'll go ahead and show you this. So you'll notice the shorter gentleman, when the way he walks, he has kind of a waddle. His head will move side to side, okay? And when we walk side to side like that, what actually happens is the foot and the way it lifts, kind of like this right here with my man Brutus, if the foot does not lift like this while we walk, the tibialis anterior that inserts onto the first metatarsal will become significantly underactive. And one of the main issues with the shin splints is that the front part of the shin, that tibialis anterior, is heavily deconditioned. And if we have this tendency to walk with the feet out, turned out, let's say 10, 15 degrees, even 5 degrees, the tibialis anterior doesn't have to function the way it needs to, and it can just barely pick itself up. So this person right here is arguably at a higher risk for shin splints simply because this tibialis anterior right in through here that picks this foot up is not contracting the way it needs to, and therefore it's weak. It has lower neural drive to the tissue, and so when we go out to run, we're not going to keep the feet externally rotated to a specific degree that much while we run, because if we do and we don't lift the foot up, we'll actually trip.
Wait, hold on, wait!
Okay, and what's going to force us to happen is as we increase our velocity while we run, this tibialis anterior is going to be forced to pick itself up faster and faster. So now all of a sudden while we run, the foot is forced to pick itself up, getting more like this, versus if we were to walk and kind of shift side to side like this, the tibialis anterior doesn't have to function at all. So now what happens is if we were to look at the gastrocnemius, which is the calf behind here, okay, now all of a sudden this muscle, the gastrocnemius back here, and I'll show you this muscle right here, it becomes extremely tight and overactive, because if the tibialis anterior is the agonist doing the motion, the antagonist, the calf, doesn't stretch out. Okay, so we can actually deduce that shin splints are the symptom and not the problem. Because we go out for a run, now we force our feet to increase more of the angle right here. Let's say we'll call this 30 degrees, and let's say this is only 18 degrees. So now the tibialis anterior that's contracting to lift this foot up has to work significantly more. And then over time, if this muscle isn't strong enough, what it does is it'll start to inflame amongst itself and compress in throughout all the nerves, and that's where the shin splint comes from. Okay, so the calves get too overactive and they can't stretch out, and then it becomes a problem. If the tibialis anterior can't contract, then the calf muscle can't stretch out effectively, and it just perpetuates itself. And then if we look at an actual stretch reflex of a tissue, then that actually starts to impede on the entire process as well. The stretch reflex looks like this. So a tissue will stretch like this, and it'll return. And so in between this graph right here, these X's represent thermal heat, okay? Energy can be neither created nor destroyed, and unfortunately, we only get back a certain percentage of the initial stretch. We don't get back the full 100%. So let's just call it 80%. So we actually, the stretch reflex, if you were to stretch a band and let it go, what we actually get back is the area underneath this curve right here. This is the force output from that initial stretch. So if someone actually has a certain case of shin splints, the initial stretch of that calf muscle is only gonna look like this. Okay, once again, the X in through here, that's your thermal heat. And then now, because the calf muscle and the soleus as well is so overactive, that now this area is so much shorter that we can't quite get as much of a good stretch on that calf muscle. To review, this is the stretch reflex of a normal tissue. If a tissue is too short because the opposing tissue doesn't activate that well, then it turns into a perpetuating cycle, and because it's short, it doesn't stretch, and because it doesn't stretch, we don't get much of a force output after that tissue stretches, so the stretch reflex just continues on this path. So when we look at those shin splints, it's the foot's inability to pick itself up and create that flexion. If we don't have that flexion of that foot and that tibialis anterior right through here that inserts onto that first metatarsal, if that's so weak, and then you force yourself to go out and run, say for 3 miles or 1 mile or however long, that tibialis anterior is just overworked. So one of the big problems actually is the fact that this muscle is extremely weak and it doesn't have the neural drive to it. It's not conditioned for it to flex the foot that much. And then the gastroc, the calf, just gets so overactive, it actually will inhibit the ability of that tibialis anterior to contract. So again, the problem just constantly perpetuates itself. The way to really treat this issue is, if we have person number 1 again, we have to keep this angle. So that way this angle, if this is the leg and this is the foot, this angle of 30 degrees, that becomes the norm. Rather than here, if the foot angle is at 18 degrees, which isn't very much, okay, 18 degrees, if this is the norm, then someone's gonna have problems. You can easily make the argument that they have a high risk for those shin splints, because those toes, when they're turned out, the feet are turned out, we're not lifting the feet while we walk, that tibialis anterior just really isn't that strong. So the method and the protocol that we need to follow is we need to loosen up the gastroc and the calf in through here, and then we need to strengthen up the tibialis anterior in through here. So then that way the new norm becomes the foot flexing much more while we walk and while we run versus while we just walk. So that way we're not forced to drag the feet while we run and or while we walk. So the next steps here, I'm going to show a few exercises that can loosen up the calf and the soleus, as well as some exercises that will strengthen the tibialis anterior, and we'll be all set. Okay, now we're going to discuss some of the methods that we can use to both treat and prevent shin splints. We're going to take this lacrosse ball right here, and I usually like to do some sort of bench, or in this case a box. We're going to replicate child's pose from a yoga stretch, however with one difference. We're going to take this lacrosse ball. I actually have this lacrosse ball taped so that way it has a little bit more friction to it. I want to take this lacrosse ball, I want to put it in the knee as deep as I can go. Now from here, I'm going to sit back real strong.
And notice if I use a box like this, I have a weight right here to kind of counterbalance my weight. Because I really want to ensure that I lean back and that I get as much of my weight over this ankle as possible. Now, the traditional child's pose, the foot is dorsiflexed. And that's one thing that we want to avoid. So I want to pull this toe forward to help give that a little bit more of a stretch, because the devil's going to be in the details here. So what this does is this lacrosse ball is going to activate some of the GTOs, the Golgi tendon organs that are located in the tendon junction. And then after a while, after the GTOs start to sense this pressure and this tension on the tissue, it's going to tell the muscle spindles, it's going to inhibit those spindles, it's going to get this tissue to relax more. Now, I would prefer to not give you just a structured way to stretch, but more or less teach how to manipulate this stretch so that way it has a discomfort level of about maybe a 6, 7, or even an 8 or a 9. I don't want it too much. I don't want too much discomfort. But from here, if it only feels about like a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is the most discomfort, let's increase that to about maybe a 7. I can start to move my body weight back. I can even come off the box just a little bit and I press down as I pull that toe forward. I can rock back and forth to give it a little bit more of like a massage, and just moving back and forth just like this. I want to hold this for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, sometimes longer, depending on the severity. And just in general, this drill will help with knee flexion, it'll help with the squat, and it'll help with our vertical jump, because it also will help stretch the quad out, because this lacrosse ball will separate the femur from the tib and the fibia more. So we get several benefits just with this one stretch right here. So what I can do from here as I progress at this stretch with the lacrosse ball, I can come back to the original child's pose that we pull the toe forward, and then...
And then? No and then. That's all I want.
I can take this weight and I can set it down, pressing down really strong. And that's gonna help bring actually the butt much closer to the heel. And just remember to pull that toe forward. And again, holding this for 2 minutes or so will help break up that calf muscle and get that to release quite well, actually. Kind of move back and forth. Now, another progression is we can use a cue ball, like in billiards, which would be this right here. And I don't recommend this for someone that initially does this, wait, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, but take this cue ball, put this in through there in the back of that knee, get it as deep as you can, and then just start to sit down. Moving back and forth again. I can sag into this stretch, pull that toe forward, and just really moving back and forth. Again, holding that for 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Do this once, twice a day. And of course, you want to do it on both sides. Just like that. And if you're really advanced at this stretch, you can also do the same thing and put this 30-pound medicine ball back up on top, just like that, just like we did previously. Now, the next thing is a calf stretch. Calf stretches are interesting because sometimes if people have calves that are so tight, it's difficult to stretch and it's difficult for them to really engage and feel the tissue lengthening. I actually like this industrial sized doorstop, and I can also take this with me while I travel and get this on Amazon. And then all I need is some sort of apparatus, some sort of wall. And what I can do is I can just take my foot, and in a real subtle detail, I actually pull the toe up a little bit. So I'll pull that toe up as I move into the stretch, and I can just lean pretty much onto any surface as I pull my toe up. And I can hold this here, again, for another 90 seconds or to 2 minutes, and just holding that right there. Then I, of course, would switch feet. I can actually act as if I'm kind of pushing on this wall, whatever apparatus I have right here, holding that right there, squeezing the quad, lifting the toe up, and I'm actually pressing, holding that there again, 60 to 90 seconds. If and when you start to feel the tissue tingling, go numb, that's exactly what we want, because that, again, are the Golgi tendon organs telling the tissue to release a little bit more. And now the next stretch that we want to do is we want to stretch the soleus. So here, I got some PVC pipe, and I just put my toe on it. And again, I can put my hands on some sort of apparatus, and this time I can actually press the big toe down a little bit. And I start to bend and flex that knee. Again, the soleus is only a one joint muscle. It doesn't work at the knee. The gastroc, the calf muscle, is a two joint muscle. It works both at the ankle, and the gastroc originates actually on the femur. So it's a two joint muscle. The soleus is only a one joint muscle. It only works at the ankle. So we're gonna sit down and sag into this stretch hard. And again, holding it for about 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, until you kind of feel it start to tingle and go numb, or the discomfort of the stretch minimizes. That's what we want. And then again, we'll switch sides. And then we'll sag into this real strong. Now we need to strengthen up the tibialis anterior. And there's several different ways that we can do this. First off, one of the easiest drills we can do is we can do a high toe walk. And I'll do it this way. So we just sit back at the hip, we lift the toes up, and we're just gonna walk forward like this. Okay, and we're gonna walk backwards. And the best thing about this is if your gym crush sees you walking like this, man, it's gonna make you look all hot and sexy. Trust me on that one. Just walking back and forth. Here it is walking forward. Just lift the toes up. We want to keep the balls of the feet off. And this is how you're going to walk up to your gym crush and hit on them. Just like that. Okay. The next thing you could do is real simple. We can just tap the toes. Up, up. So if you're standing in line at the grocery store, or at the bank.
I get a little gas from time to time, that's all.
Lifting your toes, just tapping, just tapping. You can lift them both together. Now, we want to make sure that we don't just kind of rock back. If we rock back, then the feet just get leveraged up. We don't necessarily engage that tibialis anterior that inserts onto the first metatarsal. We want to really pick those feet up. And sometimes you can even just hold it and release. And now the next one, get some sort of mat that you can sit down on, just like this. Okay, and this is actually a tib bar. Take that, you can add some weight, and you're gonna sit yourself down. And the reason why we do this is so that way your feet have plenty of room for movement. And then you're gonna take this right here, and you just put it on top. Just like that. And then now, we can just really take our time. Pulling up really strong, squeeze, hold, 5 to 6 reps, slow on the eccentric to get a significant amount of neural drive back onto the tibialis anterior and through here. Come up, squeeze, hold, hold. If you decide to go this route, be careful using this too much initially, because if you do, you'll be so sore because of the new stimulus and because of that eccentric load and through there. Down, coming back up, holding, just like that. This will also help with ankle stability while we run, and back down, just like that. So maybe 3 to 5 sets of about 3 to 5 reps in the beginning with some fairly light weight. And then of course you can up the weight. I'm not overly concerned with how many sets and reps you do. The biggest concern is to loosen up the calf muscles and to strengthen up the tibialis anterior, and to just focus on the walking gait and make sure that we walk straight. Now, there are some anomalies. If someone has some sort of congenital issue where the feet are just not straight while we walk, that's a bit of an outlier, but that's a topic for another video. So that's how we mitigate shin splints. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. All my contact information is in the description below. For those of you that appreciate this content and wish to support this channel, there are links below to where you can donate. At the very least, please like and subscribe to this video, and we'll see you all next time.